Greetings to you all from the city of Nairobi, and welcome to today's webinar themed Tapping into Talent, Inclusive Apprenticeships and Work-Based Learning for People with Disabilities. I am Jacqueline Mugo, President of the International Organization of Employers and Executive Director and CEO of the Federation of Kenya Employers, and I am delighted to be part of this important discussion, one that has the power to transform not only workplaces, but also societies on disability inclusion, particularly through apprenticeships. With over 1 billion people living with disabilities worldwide and employment rates still unfortunately low, employers play a central role in creating opportunities and driving change. At IOE, we believe that through inclusive apprenticeships, employers are not only addressing skill gaps, but also unlocking the potential of people with disabilities. Inclusion is more than a policy. It is a strategy for innovation, diversity, and productivity. Today's discussion will focus on the critical role of employers in providing opportunities and breaking down barriers to inclusion in apprenticeships. I hope we can also reflect on the transformative impact of these efforts on workplaces and society at large. As employers lead the way in promoting disability inclusion, they inspire a positive shift that benefits everyone. We at the IOE thank you for joining us today, and we hope that by the end of this session, you will feel empowered to champion this cause and take meaningful steps towards building inclusive workplaces. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to Catherine Rowan, the Executive Director of GAN Global, the Global Apprenticeship Network. Thank you and welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. It's a great honor to be with you here today, as well as with many of our esteemed speakers. For those of you who speak other languages, we do have interpreters available. We have English, French, and Spanish, and we also have sign language. It says, I think, American Sign Language, but it's actually International Sign Language to make it easier for those of you from various jurisdictions around the world. This is such an important and auspicious occasion for all of us, the three partners, the IOE, the ILO, Global Business Disability Network, and the Global Apprenticeship Network, GAN Global, working together towards a common cause, and it's really all about recognizing the importance and the benefits of including persons with disabilities in the world of work. So we felt it was really important to create some space to talk about the role of inclusive apprenticeships and work-based learning for people with disabilities. For those of you who are unfamiliar with GAN Global, we're a private sector led alliance. We've focused on really promoting and talking about apprenticeships and work-based learning. We have been doing so for the past 10 years and grew out of a concern for rampantly high youth unemployment. And we're very proud that we have both the IOE and the ILO as founding partners of our organization. We fundamentally believe that the private sector has a critical role to play in upskilling the workforce both for today and tomorrow, but also providing opportunities for individuals, strengthening our communities through quality apprenticeships, and doing it in an inclusive way. So, and our members felt so strongly about this that last January, almost a year ago, we launched Corporate Champions for Apprenticeship, and this was at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And we felt it was important to publicly demonstrate the commitment and our full commitment to the guiding principles of quality apprenticeships. And this is based on our 208, Recommendation 208, that was approved universally at the International Labor Conference in June of last year. And in short, every corporate champion is aligned to our 208, to the principles of quality apprenticeship, and very committed to improving and to promoting the work around quality apprenticeship. One of those guiding principles, those key principles, is around incorporating measures to promote equality, diversity, and social inclusions. And our members have undertaken to measure how they're doing in all aspects of the guiding principles, to develop a maturity profile, to self-assess where they stand. And interestingly, the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion was one of the strongest. So I'm very pleased that we have two of our members here today as panelists. We have Nestle and Adaptive Construction Solutions, ACS, who are going to be speaking about what they're doing on the ground to really promote inclusive apprenticeship programs and work-based learning programs. So we have a great program for you here today. We're going to kick off the program with two keynote speakers. Very happy to have Anne Vaucher, who's the chair of the IOE's Gender Equality Diversity Policy Working Group. She's going to talk about the case for disability and inclusion in the workplace. We have Jürgen Menze, who is the ILO's GBDN manager, and he will address the topic of reasonable accommodations and universal design in apprenticeships. And then we're going to get into a panel discussion, which Sonia Janahi, who's chair of the IOE's Employment Skills and Digitalization Policy Working Group, is going to chair. And so we'll have Nestle, ACS, and also Jacqueline will be back to speak as well on the work being done specifically in Kenya. So if you have questions, we're going to have a chance for Q&A after the panel. We'll be doing it in the chat, so get ready to input your questions. And before I turn the floor over to Anne, our first keynote, I'd like to share a short video that has been prepared by the three partners just to set some context around this very important discussion. So we'll hear the video now.
There are more than 1.3 billion people with disabilities worldwide, according to the World Health Organization. Despite the International Labour Organization's estimate that some 80% are of working age, their employment rates are still unfortunately low.
There are several and manifold barriers for people with disabilities accessing the open labor market. That could be attitudinal barriers, physical barriers, but also digital barriers, like other marginalized groups in the labor market. People with disabilities just need to get an opportunity to show that they're willing and can work.
Inclusion is a powerful catalyst for productivity. Skill gaps are right in front of us as a top priority for a growing number of companies. And we have a golden opportunity to be more effective in integrating people with disabilities into the labor market.
Apprenticeships play a crucial role in addressing skills gaps because apprentices get practical, hands-on experience, allowing them to develop the specific skills that employers need. Many policy frameworks specifically target underrepresented groups in apprenticeship programs, promoting inclusivity and diversity. And this is evident in measures that are aimed at encouraging women, encouraging minorities, and also people with disabilities to pursue apprenticeship opportunities. Apprenticeship programs that include people with disabilities can have a profound impact on workplaces in so many ways, such as culture, employee engagement, corporate reputation, innovation, and productivity, even better customer understanding.
Beyond regulations, beyond legal requirements, there are values, there is culture at the workplace. More and more employers not only want to ensure that their practice meet the new regulations or standards for accessibility, but more importantly, they want to lead the change. The best way to be effective is to focus on what individuals can achieve. We need to break the barriers.
Technology can play a pivotal role in making apprenticeship programs more accessible. Technology can enable apprenticeship programs to reach a much wider audience, provide flexible training options, and facilitate valuable connections that enhance the overall experience for apprentices.
As long as digital technology is designed and implemented in an accessible, inclusive way, they provide immense opportunities for people with disabilities in the labor market.
IOE is committed to supporting employers' diversity efforts. We will work to eliminate discrimination, bias, and the daily barriers faced by people with disabilities.
Sorry, folks. I think the technology got the better of us. Unfortunately, the video was a little bit challenging to listen to for sure. We'll put it in the chat, and you can watch it at your leisure. So thanks for your patience with that. I think now we're going to turn to Anne for her keynote address.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. As chair of the IOE Gender Equality and Diversity Policy Working Group, I will discuss the transformative potential of accessible apprenticeships and work-based learning programs in bridging skill gaps and unlocking untapped talent, creating more inclusive and dynamic workplaces. Globally, as it was already said, there are over 1.3 billion people living with disability worldwide. Among them, 80% are of working age. Yet, employment rates for people with disability remains unfortunately very low. This is not just a social issue, it's a missed opportunity for businesses and, of course, for society. Creating this inclusive workplace benefits everyone. First, to employers. Employers benefit significantly by tapping into these untapped talent pools, gaining diverse perspectives, boosting creativity, and fostering employees' loyalties. Studies consistently show that inclusive organizations experience higher employee engagement, greater loyalty, and stronger team dynamics. Even a Boston Consulting Group study in 2021 highlights that inclusive workplace culture drive higher job satisfaction and better work-life balance, enhancing overall the productivity. Second, input to society. Society thrives through inclusion as dependency on social systems decreases. Integrating people with disabilities into the workforce is not only cost-effective, but also enriches organizations with diverse talents while fostering independence and self-resilience. On the contrary, exclusion carries economic cost. When over 1 million individuals are excluded from the workforce, they miss opportunities to contribute to this economic growth, productivity, and social protection systems. Instead, they often rely on non-contributory benefits and the support of family or public carers, resulting in a dual economic loss and cost to society. So apprenticeships and work-based learning are one of the most impactful ways to promote disabilities inclusion. Apprenticeship and work-based learning are a powerful tool to bridge the gap between education and employment, equipping people with disabilities with practical skills directly aligned with labor market needs. They also provide employers a structured way to meet and train underutilized talent while overcoming stereotypes about disabilities. WBL programs are smart business. They foster independence for participants and bring fresh energy to workplaces. Business has constantly seeking to close the skills gap, and this talent to fill these gaps is often hiding in plain sight among people with disability. However, to unlock this potential, all stakeholders have a key role to play to address barriers that limit people with disabilities access to education, to training, and to jobs. First, governments. Governments must actively support the inclusion of people with disability in the workforce by implementing targeted fiscal benefits and economic policies. These measures could include, for example, tax incentives for employers who hire and retain employees with disabilities, funding for workplace accessibility improvements, and subsidies for training programs tailored to their needs. By fostering a supportive environment, governments can reduce societal dependency costs, enhance economic productivity, and empower individuals with disabilities to contribute meaningfully to the economy. Second, education systems must equip students with disabilities for the workforce by aligning skill development with labor market demands. This requires, of course, active consultation with employers to identify the labor market needs and collaboration with organizations representing people with disabilities to implement effective accessibility measures. Third, businesses must collaborate with education systems and engage in dialogue with governments to ensure policies are effective and tailored to the needs of both employers and individuals with disabilities. Creating an inclusive environment requires the involvement of all workers, not just management, and calls for comprehensive training to foster a workplace where everyone can thrive. The journey to full inclusion is not simple, but it's achievable. With the right apprenticeships, work-based learning programs, and commitment from all of us, we can close these skill gaps, tap into underutilized talent, and build a future where no one is left behind. So inclusion is a powerful catalyst for productivity. Diverse and inclusive workplaces are more productive workplaces and better aligned with the needs of society. In this sense, creating inclusive apprenticeship programs for people with disability is one key step towards addressing the skills gaps and bridging it effectively, and ultimately benefiting not just businesses, but society as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne. And now I think we turn to Jürgen. Over to you, Jürgen.
Yeah, thanks so much, Catherine, and thanks in general to the Global Apprenticeship Network and especially the International Organization of Employers for this webinar co-organized by us, the ILO Global Business and Disability Network. And it's a real pleasure and privilege to address you. My name is Jürgen Mentek, the coordinator of the ILO Global Business and Disability Network. And before I deliver some remarks, maybe some of you might not know what we do and what we are in the Global Business and Disability Network. We are coming together of 40 multinational enterprises. One is also speaking later, Nestle, but also 45 national business and disability networks, including the one in Kenya, represented here by Jacqueline. It's great to see you. And we're coming together to make it easier for employers, especially bigger companies, but also small and medium-sized enterprises, to include people with disabilities in their policies and practices, including, of course, related to workplace learning and apprenticeships, because the companies we work with, the employers, they understand it's not only an ethical imperative to include people with disabilities as employees, as customers in the communities, but it also makes business sense. And we have already heard a lot about the business benefits of including persons with disabilities, but employers, companies also want to be just fair entities. They want to treat people fairly, equitable. And unfortunately, still people with disabilities are penalized in the labor market. We know there are inefficiencies in the labor market around the world, where we see that marginalized groups like people with disabilities are still having poorer labor market outcomes, starting already early in educational settings. So we need to put some extra effort, some affirmative action to overcome the barriers that society, labor markets still display when it comes to marginalized groups, including people with disabilities. We already heard a few statistics, but I just wanted to emphasize again the statistics we have here in the International Labour Organization, the ILO. They say that 7 in 10 people with disabilities are outside of the labor market. 7 in 10. They're not even actively looking for jobs anymore because they're discouraged. They face so many barriers, compared to 4 in 10 persons without disabilities. So the gap, the disability employment gap, is massive. And when we look at youth with disabilities and apprenticeships, workplace learning oftentimes typically also relates to younger people, let's say under 25. And there we see youth with disabilities are on average roughly twice as likely to be not in employment, not in education, not in training or NEET, compared to their peers without disabilities. So there's a massive gap that we need to address with affirmative action, with commitment by companies, not only companies, of course. I mean, there are other actors that we need to get involved, but here we're talking about employers. And I would say if you take one thing away from my remarks, because it's hard to remember a lot. I mean, my memory is failing me a lot. But if you want to take one thing away, I would say, look, if you are starting your disability inclusion journey, consult with persons with disabilities directly. If you don't have employees with disabilities yet, or you might not know because they're not self-identifying as having a disability because the setting might not be safe yet. But if you are only starting, consult with persons with disabilities through, for example, their representative organizations at local, at national level, and just have a chat to understand better the needs and barriers of persons with disabilities and how they can be included in your corporate policies, practices in general, but of course also related to apprenticeships and workplace learning. We know workplace learning, we already heard about the content. It's an amazing way to address the skills gap that companies face. They're all looking for talent, right? It's a war for talent. I heard from one of our companies, a war for talent. So you cannot not tap into the pool of persons with disabilities. That's untapped pool that we see around the world. And at the same time, of course, it's an amazing way to bridge the gap, or skills gap sometimes still people with disabilities have, because they are marginalized, they're excluded from vocational training early on. As I said, some might not even get mainstream education in a young age. So there are additional barriers for persons with disabilities to compete because they have been excluded oftentimes from early on have not had the same opportunities as persons without disabilities. I'm supposed to talk a little bit about accessibility, reasonable accommodation. I'll keep it short because I'm really looking forward to that panel discussion with amazing panelists. But, well, I said if you want to take one thing away from my remarks, it's about consulting with organization of persons with disabilities. If I may add the 3 A's, accessibility, accommodation, and awareness. I think making it easy to remember the 3 A's, accessibility means you create spaces that are accessible for anyone. And that's important. Sometimes this discussion about accessibility is put into a niche, into a disability niche. This is only for persons with disabilities. No, it's not. When we think about, for example, the sidewalks, the physical accessibility with the curbs lowered. I mean, look, a few years ago, I was pushing the stroller of our daughter through the city of Geneva where I live. There, it's very clear. It's not only for persons with disabilities, wheelchair users, for example. If we think about digital accessibility, captioning, we have captioning here in the webinar, but when you look at videos, the digital infrastructure in a company, is this all accessible? Do you have, for example, captioning? And this is not only for persons with disabilities. Sometimes you might all be on public transport. You don't want to bother people. You have forgotten your headphones. You still want to watch a video. So you rely on captions, not only for persons with disabilities. So this accessibility is a universal concept. There's this concept of universal design. So you make services, products, spaces universally accessible, including persons with disabilities. And at the same time, we still have the need for reasonable accommodations. What is this? We're going to actually next week, we're going to discuss it in the global conference of our global network on, I think it's Wednesday or Thursday, that session. So if you're interested in learning more about reasonable accommodation, join next week. We also, it's a topic at the Business and Human Rights Forum also on Monday. So you can learn more about that there. But I'm just saying that still, if you improve the accessibility in terms of digital and physical infrastructures in your company, you might still encounter needs, individual needs that are not yet addressed. And then you have to address them through reasonable accommodation, sometimes also called reasonable adjustments. These are typically, they don't involve a financial cost in most of the cases. It's, for example, just changing the schedule. People might have to come in later at work, or they work from home. So it's not always like buying costly equipment. Most of the time it's free of a financial cost. And of course, most listening and most speaking here today might have benefited from reasonable accommodations. Me as a father of a young child, also, for example, that can also be considered reasonable accommodation, but that is much of a disability concept, but it's different from accessibility. The more you create accessibility, the less you will have a need to individually provide reasonable accommodations for persons with disabilities. And awareness, of course, we only can be more aware about many things, but I think there's a lot of misconceptions and stereotypes, stigma when we talk about persons with disabilities. Sometimes even people want to avoid the term disability. They think it's a bad word, it's a dirty word. They invent all kinds of strange terminology, which people with disabilities don't even feel comfortable with. So talking about it like we do today is an important step. As I said before, just talk to a person with this disability. It's only one person, of course. Can't speak on behalf of all persons with disabilities. But I think these 3 initial things you can do. Think about accessibility, about your physical, digital space. What about addressing the individual needs of persons with disabilities at work? And then awareness. We can all, I mean, I learn every day. I've been working on disability for 1.5 decades. I'm learning something new every day. And so I hope you can take these messages away from today. Thanks so much.
Fantastic, Jürgen. Thank you so much. It was an excellent intervention. And my takeaway are 3 A's. If I took anything from what you said, it's really the need to be access, awareness, and accommodation. It's fantastic. So I think now we're going to turn to our panel discussion. So we'll turn the floor over to Sonia Janahi. So Sonia, great to have you aboard, and we'll turn things over to you, and we'll get the input from our representatives on the panel. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. And hello from Baku. I apologize if there's noise in the background, but because I'm in COP29, but happy to be here and to be with everybody. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce my panelists, Maria Fernanda Villota, and apologize if I'm pronouncing anything wrong, Head of Human Resource, Zone LATAM, Nutrition Business, Youth Initiative Leader, Zone LATAM and Nestle. Nicholas Morgan, President of Adaptive Construction Solutions, and Jacqueline Mugo, Executive Director, Federation of Kenyan Employers, and IOE President. What we'd like to talk about today is, of course, understanding inclusive apprenticeship programs, and we'd like to see what the private sector is doing about it. Where do they see themselves, the private sector, what programs they've done, and how can we apply these programs or these strategies as best practices globally so that everybody can benefit from it and take advantage and apply to make life easier for even employers, enterprises, to ensure that they apply the right and best practice strategies. So starting with Maria Fernanda, please, if I may ask you, Nestle is a global leader in youth employment and skills development. How can you share with us, strategies and initiatives that Nestle has implemented to ensure workplace learning programs? And does it include people with disabilities?
Yes, and thank you. For Nestle and before sharing some examples with you, I just want to highlight that diversity and inclusion is an integral part of our company, is part of our culture, and it brings up our purpose and values to life. So our values are rooted in respect for ourselves, for each other, for diversity, and for the future. And everything that we do, it's within that frame. So we have the power to create exponential results. I think that's one of the biggest things that Nestle has, because it has presence all over the world. So everything that we do and we try to do, it has a huge impact and it can create huge results. But then you may think, okay, but then it's Nestle and it's super big, but we had to start from scratch. So I want to share with you 3 different examples about different levels of maturity that we have in LATAM, because it's always a path when you start integrating people with disabilities, and especially in apprenticeship programs. So just to put you in context, 70 to 75% of our workforce are in factories, distribution centers, or our sales force. So the examples that I want to share with you today come or are being developed in factories. This is because our biggest bulk of people is there, and I think it's worth it to share. So the first one that I want to share with you, it's in Central America. Central America is just starting to include people with disabilities in the apprenticeship program. And as Jürgen shared, the first thing that we need to do when we don't know how to start is to partner. So in Guatemala, we have partnered with NGOs, associations, universities, and even the Ministry of Labor to have organized job fairs and just starting to connect the talent with the needs that we have as a company. And now we have our first round of apprenticeship in the factory of Antigua. What we had to do to make it more inclusive is that HR had to learn how to conduct inclusive interviews, focus on skills while eliminating unconscious bias. And this is a whole path where we need to learn how to do and to ensure that we are being inclusive in the process. And that's like the first level. But then if we go to a second example, I want to share with you Chile. Chile has a school that is called the Apprenticeship School. This school exists as of 2015, and it was a school to prepare apprenticeship for 2 weeks before going into the factories. And what we realized is that when we started to invite people with disability to participate here, there were huge gaps between the other people that were participating. And sometimes when they started their apprenticeship, we had desertion, people leaving, not understanding, and not being ready to start these on-the-job training. So what we did this year is to create something that is called the Inclusive School. And this is being done in 2024. And it's through some alliances with 2 foundations, Institución de Rehabilitación de Valparaíso and Fundación Emplea. And with these partnerships, we ensure that young individuals are trained in inclusive social labor skills, competencies that are necessary for the workplace, such as work habits, teamwork, conflict resolution. And after they leave this for 2 weeks, then they go to these apprenticeship schools it lasts 2 weeks as well. So for 1 month before going into a factory, our apprentices go through an onboarding program that teach or allow them to be more prepared to start, to understand the way that Nestle works in a factory, real work day, and then they can be more happy, aligned. We can actually understand their needs, and they can have a better path of learning when they enter to our factories. And this has been very successful. Throughout this year, we have actually impacted more than 100 persons with disability in this inclusive school. And the last one that I want to share with you, it's our example in our Garoto factory. Our Garoto factory is located in Brazil. Brazil is a country with more than 200 million people. So the impact that we do, it's huge on the company and on the country. And what they have developed is absolutely amazing. So Nestlé Vila Vela is the Garoto factory, is one of the 10th largest chocolate factories worldwide. And they started in 2005 to create a position of sign language interpreter. And this is something that, I mean, it's a long time ago, but they started to create this path to allow people to be connected and to allow people to actually have a good development path within the factory. So now they have almost 100 people with hearing disabilities within the factory. And if you see the whole path that they have created, it's absolutely amazing because everything in the factory is in sign language. They can grow and develop in whatever they want. They have created something that is called the Chocolate University. So people can become expert in the category and grow if they want to in different levels after their apprenticeship. So what is important about this is how you can create an environment that is inclusive for all. If you go to this factory, everything is tailored for people with hearing disabilities and different disabilities, but they have actually focused on that. And it's absolutely amazing to see the way that people have engaged and create this community where everybody can thrive, where everybody can aspire to different sort of jobs if they want to and develop in whatever they want to. So they have changed the way they have their internal communication in sign language. They do have a video conference app in WhatsApp to achieve people that need to assist people that need to have sign language assistant. They have a communication through WhatsApp. And this factory, as I was telling you, is one of the biggest ones in the world in chocolate. And today they have a 0.55% turnover in the company. So in the factory. So there you can see how purpose connects you differently to what you do. And I think that's an amazing result. And we're very proud to share that as well.
Thank you, Maria. That's amazing. But let me summarize what you said. Would it be correct to say that there is no one glove that fits all and you need to strategize it based on the country that you are based in and based on the strategy of the country, but you also need to have the government involved because you have to have the right policies to support you to set up the infrastructure that helps you in ensuring that, you know, whatever you're doing is inclusive of all. Would that be a correct statement?
Yes, absolutely. And to give you one example, as I was telling you, the factory of Garoto created this position of sign language in 2005. And then in 2010, there was a law that recognized sign language interpreter as a profession and is approved. So before we create a bridge, and sometimes as private sector, we have to do that, but then it goes to government and we change things. We change the rules of the game. And if you see now, they have created this profession approved by law. So I do think that, of course, we have different actors, but we move different stakeholders to create change in society. You're absolutely right.
Thank you so much, Maria. Let's now go to Nicholas. And I'm seeing the questions. We'll come back to Maria later with the questions. Don't worry. But let's talk to Nicholas now. Nicholas, ACS has been recognized for its work in creating opportunities for underrepresented groups, including people with disabilities, and specifically in the construction sector. what specific steps has ACS taken to adapt its apprenticeship programs to be more inclusive, and what impact has this created in terms of changes on both apprenticeships and your business?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And it's really a pleasure to be here with a lot of familiar faces. And, I hope, Sonia, while you're at COP29, you're able to connect with our COO, Paul Champion. I don't know if you were able to meet yesterday. And it's great to be represented both at COP29, but even earlier in the year through our partnership with GAN Global at the World Economic Forum as they launched their Corporate Champions program, which is a fantastic way for everybody to learn more about apprenticeships from thought leaders, as well as those that have been involved in the practical delivery of apprenticeships, which has always been the perspective that we look to add, which is the focus of today. And so really thankful for IOE and GAN Global for including us. I have to say, our strategy has been really a selfish strategy, meaning this is something that's really rooted in our foundation because of a business, because it's personal for me, because after or during my service in the U.S. military, I was wounded during combat operations, and I found myself going from the battlefield to the hospital to being back to civilian life, trying to find a way to support my family within a matter of months. And at that time, I was in and out of the hospital frequently and found myself largely unemployable. So I did what I had to do for myself and my family, and that was become an entrepreneur and started my own business, which eventually led to the creation of ACS, a second business, both of which operate still today. And so from the very beginning, what I did is I recognized that there's certain population groups that if you were able to create the right environment, you would see a clear return on investment initially amongst those demographics, but really, especially in the more recent generations of new workers, is they want to work in an environment that has these principles. And so then you start to see employee retention, fostering the engagement that you need across your workforce to bring an extra value to your business because of integrating these principles. And so as ACS, we're an apprenticeship provider, right? And we're the largest intermediary for apprenticeships in the United States, with 98 workforce development staff and compliance staff, all focused on apprenticeship programs. This is what's core to our business. And over the years, we have continuously expanded our engagement through partnership networks, like our earlier colleague discussed, by learning from others, to the point that now 46% of our team identifies as having a disability. What's remarkable is, we have a 20% higher retention rate amongst the individuals in our business that do have a disability. But the latest statistic I was able to run was for employees that have been with the business for more than 5 years, over 60% of them have a disability. So we can clearly see the return on investment. And so as we engage employers about leveraging apprenticeship programs, both in construction, but other sectors as well. We have a human resources apprenticeship internally that we use. We're launching a project management program. That's how we've trained a lot of people with disabilities and employed them during their training. But businesses need to see this as a return on investment, because that's how you gain organizational commitment. And that is absolutely key, because organizational commitment expands past economic cycles. It becomes a way they do business, not just because, this is what we need to do because of really low unemployment rates. And if we don't go here, where else are we going to find them? Instead, they find that this is how they really develop the culture that they want in their business. And, we currently have we're about to approach 2,000 apprentices in our program, all again employed, almost for the most part in the construction industry. But 19% of those individuals have a disability, where Department of Labor Out of over 500,000 apprentices, only 1.3% self-identify as having a disability. So you can see that the drastic difference, and you know, part of that is due to our engagement with veteran organizations and whatnot. But a lot of people don't realize that veterans, we just like to call them the tip of our spear. We do a lot more work across different population groups, underserved populations and communities. But you know, every time we've had a success and we kind of look at root cause analysis, what led to successes, it's usually through collaboration with nonprofits and community-based organizations, partnerships with like vocational rehabilitation programs, because what they have always done is help support those individuals to make sure that any barriers to success are removed, as well as get them through that initial period of integrating into the workforce and getting them to demonstrate that long-term commitment. So I'm really thankful for all the partners that we have, but you know, really, you know, when you think about the bigger success, the biggest investment that's ever going to be made in apprenticeship is the employer, right? And it takes all of those organizations to what we like to call co-invest in that apprentice, especially those with disabilities, whether it's assisting with accommodations or again, those barriers. That is just a small piece of the pie. Giving somebody a job, giving them a career pathway, letting them know that, hey, you have a future in the business. Those are the principles that will generate the return on investment, that again, retention and foster the engagement that you expect.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. I totally agree with you. This is the hot topic in COP29 today, just transition and what needs to be done, and skilling and upskilling through apprenticeship is the key word. And you guys are already, you know, on the way doing this. And amazing that not only, you know, are you doing it on a specific route, but it's inclusive. And you're not leaving anyone behind. And I think that's the most important thing that everybody needs to focus on, and every organization needs to focus on, because this enhances productivity, which by default enhances the ROI of any organization as well. Thank you so much, Nicholas. We've got a few questions. We'll come back to you after Jacqueline. Jacqueline, tell us about Kenya. I know that there has been a growing focus on inclusive employment practices, and from your perspective as the executive director of FKE, how are the Kenyan employers approaching the inclusion of people with disability in apprenticeship programs, and what role has your organization played in supporting these efforts?
Thank you very much, Sonia, for that question. It's good to see you all the way from Baku. It's my pleasure to take part in this panel and to share the Kenyan experience. There have been quite a lot of changes in terms of the policy and the regulatory space around how to accommodate persons with disabilities. And over time, I must say I've seen quite a lot of change, particularly in the mindset and the approach from employers in accepting that this is an issue they need to address. So there's been a lot of progress with regard to incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion policies into human resource frameworks to ensure that people with disabilities are considered in recruitment, in training, and also workplace accommodations. These policies are guided by international instruments such as the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and some local pieces of legislation that have come up in the last few years, and FKA has been fairly engaged in that process of coming up with the new laws. We've also had employers adapting their workplaces for accessibility. The reality is that many of our workplaces were built many years ago, and we did not take into account how people with disabilities would access them. So a good number of employers have modified their workplaces to ensure that they install ramps, elevators, ergonomic workstations, and assistive technologies that allow persons with disabilities to access the workplaces and perform tasks effectively during apprenticeship programs in particular. But the more difficult one has been getting companies to adapt the work arrangements, like flexible work times, to allow people to come to work at a time that's convenient, because you can imagine the use of public transport. If you are a person with disabilities, it may not always be easy, but we've seen employers accommodate that and allow people to come to work at different times, which is a fairly new idea. We have also seen employers tailoring apprenticeship programs to enhance inclusivity. This is being done in collaboration with training institutions such as the National Industrial Training Authority, to which employers contribute a levy to support industrial training. And these programs are aimed at developing specific programs that are tailor-made to meet the needs of persons with disabilities. This includes designing training modules that emphasize skills that are relevant both to the industry and the unique abilities and skills of the persons with disabilities. The fourth area I'd like to share in the first part of your question is the work that has been done and the increasing awareness and capacity building of employers. Organizations we have seen are conducting disability inclusion trainings for their own managers and employees to eliminate stereotypes and to create a supportive culture. And these programs build the confidence of persons with disabilities to access workplaces, to work in workplaces, because for many years they felt excluded, and enables the teams in workplaces to work cohesively. And this has been something positive in Kenya. Now, turning to the second part of your question about the work that the Federation of Kenya Employers has done. Historically, I must say we started working in this area as an employers body many years ago, over 18, 20 years ago. But at that time, it was not a popular idea. So the development and the increased awareness in the world has helped us. We have worked in the recent past to bring the work to employers themselves. So in 2020, the Federation of Kenya Employers, in collaboration with the ILO and an organization called Innovation to Inclusion, launched the Kenya Business Disability Network. And this has been a game changer in terms of our contribution in this area of work and the participation and ownership by employers in this work. This initiative has therefore been pivotal in equipping employers with tools and the knowledge to integrate persons with disabilities into their workforce, including apprenticeship programs, while also highlighting the value of diversity, because it is good for organizations and workplaces to have everybody contributing to their success. We have under this GBDN a steering committee comprising members. Organizations are driving it themselves. We have persons with disabilities in it as partners, also working with employers directly. So this committee pretty much runs itself. It holds quarterly breakfast meetings as part of the recruitment strategy to bring in more employers and to implement a calendar of events that they have. And through these forums, we have seen the level of sensitization enhanced and really seen a lot more people that are living with disabilities incorporated. And the good thing is that the good practices are being documented so that we can replicate them and share with employers, particularly those in remote parts of the country. The second area of work for FKE has been running actual training programs on diversity and inclusion. This we have conducted all over the country for employers so as to enhance their knowledge of the key instruments and the law, but also working alongside employers to help them design inclusive apprenticeship frameworks and initiatives to support them. We've done a lot of advocacy to get the government to agree to give incentive to employers who employ persons with disabilities. This has been difficult, it's still work in progress. When the state adopted our idea, they made the number too high. Employers had to have 10 plus persons with disabilities to be able to have the incentive, and that did not make sense. So we are still working in that area, but it's very, very important that some incentive be given to industry to be able to support them in this work. Many years ago, about 10 years ago, we started the Employee of the Year Awards. And this is an award that recognizes good practices by employers in 8 specific areas, human resource development, industrial relations, but amongst them is an aspect of diversity and inclusion. This category is where we recognize and celebrate companies that have done exemplary work in inclusion of persons with disabilities in their workplaces. And this award has set benchmarks for other employers who may not be doing work in this area to see that it has positive contribution to the eventual performance of the company. It's a program that we run on an annual basis, and we are seeing more and more companies coming in. So we will use the Employer of the Year awards as an attraction to get more and more employers to employ persons with disabilities to document what they're doing and for us to be able to celebrate that. FKE has also worked in the area of inclusive skills development programs with support from institutions like the National Industrial Training Authority. We are tailoring apprenticeship programs, focusing on equipping persons with disabilities with relevant skills to help them not just access work, but thrive in the work and perform well so that they compete just as effectively as other employees in the workplace. And I think on the whole, I can say that the work of FKE has been recognized, and our employers really appreciate the initiatives that we have. And we are seeing a change, not just in mindsets, but also the approach and the attitude of the persons with disabilities who for many years felt that we didn't have space for them, but they're increasingly being accepted in workplaces. And we also work directly with the organization that represents the persons with disabilities. And so I think I can say that FKE is doing a lot, but there's still a lot more to be done. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I do appreciate that, you know, I always say 95% of every economy is MSMEs, and MSMEs sometimes have a major financial challenge in terms of adapting to what is required. But I also understand from you the challenges that you're facing with government and the incentives that the government is putting, and it's so high. And I believe what the government needs to do is they might need to have a scale of incentives where they still give people different options and not just similar to what we talked about with Maria. You know, one glove doesn't fit all. So instead of just having like one incentive based on the percentage of inclusion, let it be flexible so that you can even encourage and bring on board more of the small and medium organizations to be part of this, because I'm sure they'd love to do it and they would need the support from the government to do it. And I think that's how it should be done. Thank you so much to all three. We're going to go now and handle the questions, and we've got a number of questions coming to us. Maria, first of all, what is your experience on paid versus non-paid apprenticeships, internship, and what percentage do you ultimately take on as permanent employees? You okay, Maria? Can you hear me?
I don't know what's going
on. I could talk about it from ACS's perspective.
We could hear her.
You know, so at ACS, what we do recognize is our work, like for instance, in Guatemala and other places that we collaborate, and this is a big part of what the Global Apprenticeship Network is focused on, is every country is going to have its own timeline to mature the delivery of quality apprenticeships. So what works in one country, it can't always work somewhere else. Here in the US, in order to get the engagement of potential apprentices, most companies, especially all of our partners, focus on employment on day one into full-time jobs. As if you're going to invest all this money in training, let's make sure there's no retention risk. And one of those retention risks is the need to sustain yourself. So focusing on that here in the US has been really important, because that helps, especially when low unemployment rates, help you find good talent. So that, you know, it's a way to be competitive and bring people in, but also it helps them get through that initial period that in many environments, you know, it just might not work out, right? It gives everyone some patience. There's a lot of federal and state and local programs that help co-invest and subsidize some of those wages for some apprentices, looking to see that expanded, looking for the next administration to create an apprenticeship tax credit here in the US that both benefits not just employers, but the apprentice themselves, the tax credit to gain that engagement. But we don't like to do too much train and pray they get a job. Instead, it's employment day one. However, we do recognize that won't work everywhere. So it's a transition of the maturity of an apprenticeship system in different countries to get to that road. But anything that starts with any kind of form of employment or some remuneration for the effort that the apprentices is really key to making sure you have good outcomes.
Thank you, Nicholas.
I'm
Maria?
back. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
something happened. So I just read the question because I couldn't hear you well. So yes, our strategy is based on 3 pillars. The first one is inclusive education. The second one is employment and training, which is giving the opportunity, and then is communication. And of course, in inclusive education, when you partner with universities, sometimes you may have non-paid and then paid apprenticeships. But I have to be super honest, the difference between, even though if it's very little, the difference between having non and paid, it's big for the autonomy of the people with disabilities that it's being engaged. Why? Because one of the things that we want to build is also economic autonomy, and for them to manage their resources, to, even though it's very little, to understand how to take a bus if they want to do, and they pay for themselves. So we encourage to give, if it's a non-paid, but to give a little bit to them, to recognize whether it's the meal or whether it's the transport. In some other parts, we do have the whole a whole salary assigned to them. But in my experience, it's very different the way that they perceive the work that they do. Even though they feel absolutely included, they value a lot being part of the team. But I do think that receiving something makes a difference. Regarding the hirings, well, it depends. Sometimes it may be 20% of the one that passes through apprenticeship, and sometimes it may be all. We have, for example, a program in nutrition where we hire apprentices from nutrition, and then we hire them to be part of our medical field force. Why? Because it's part of, this is why I named the strategy, part of our strategy of building our, the skills for the future. So it depends. It's not always a high rate. It depends on the positions that we have. But the aim of this is really to prepare people for being employed. If it's in Nestle or outside, I mean, that's the aim of the whole program.
Thank you so much, Maria. Jackie, if we may pass one question to you, and that is, how is the adaptation of workstations in Kenya financed?
How is the adaptation of workstations financed? I think the large part of it, to be honest, is left to the employer to do. I've not seen specific government programs to finance that. That's why we were engaging government through advocacy and discussions to see if there could be some incentive given to employers. So that has largely been done by employers based on the fact that the persons with disabilities have skills that they need for their workplaces. So if these people are supported to perform well at work, and we work in partnership with the organizations that represent them, then it makes business sense to invest in them. We see it just as an investment in the other employees to facilitate their work. But it is employers who bear the cost of that. And just to chip in on the issue of paying apprentices, that's been a big question in Kenya. Should companies pay or not? Again, it's left to the employer to pay. We as FKE have held that, look, people they need transport, they need some money for lunch. So we pay a small stipend to facilitate the apprentices to come. And that also applies to persons with disabilities.
Thank you so much. Sadly, we are running out of time, and we do still have a few questions, and we'll try to see if we can pass these questions later on to you individually. But Maria, Nicholas, Jacqueline, Thank you so much for the valuable information. And I can see the interest from everybody on the comments, and you can have access to the comments as well. But definitely it also shows how private-public partnerships are important. We need to work together with governments to support each other. Private sectors need support from government, while government needs support. And we all, at the end of the day, have one objective, and that is inclusion of everybody. Nobody should be left behind, and that is very important to everybody. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the valuable input that you have given us. And Catherine, back to you.
Thank you so much, Sonia. No, excellent. And you're absolutely right. You said it beautifully. No one should be left behind. And I think this discussion has really reinforced that. So I've loved watching all the questions in the chat here. We'll make sure that if you haven't answered them, as Sonia said, that we'll get answers back to you. We do have a few, we're going to turn the tables because we have a couple of questions for you, because we'd like to understand a little bit more about who's been watching us today and what your input is. So we're going to put a poll. I'm going to ask Monique to start. We have got 5 questions for you. If we could, and the panelists, unfortunately, you can't participate. But if we could start the poll now, that would be fantastic. And you literally just have to go into and select your answer. It's anonymous, so don't worry. This is just for you to input, and then we will see on an aggregate basis the answer. So we'll give you a minute or so or two to answer those questions. In the meantime, perhaps what I can do is to share the fact that as GAN Global, we've been very committed to this topic. And we have been, with the support of the IOE and also GBDN, we are pulling together a resource document, a guidance document that is for employers. It's a high-level roadmap, basically, for employers and on bridging the skills gap through inclusive apprenticeships and work-based learning. So it's kind of pulling together. It's a very high level, so not super long, but to give you some guidance. And so it'll be out early next year. So watch this space. And I'm guessing from Monique, we still have another minute or two. People are probably still filling in their answers, I would hope. That's great. I'll give you another minute, and then we'll close off the session.
Yeah, it's still going on. People are still replying.
Fabulous. Well, listen, I really want to reinforce a couple of messages that came up today. So back to Jürgen, accessibility, awareness, and accommodation. No one size fits all really rang out to me as a very key and important message. And I think what we heard is some fantastic examples about what companies can do on an individual basis, whether it's changing the way they do the interview techniques, onboarding, making language more accessible through, say, sign language, for instance, the example that Maria gave, providing flexible work arrangements, and then the importance as well of perhaps the incentives for employers and how the government can play a role. But what really resonated for me was this notion of changing mindset, that we really need to start to make sure we create open spaces, and it's changing the way we think about the role of individuals, people with disabilities, incorporating them within the workplace. And there's no question that there is a strong value to business. And I think that that was really reinforced by what Nicholas had to say in terms of understanding that there's a real return on investment when it comes to that, for the company, for the individual, and for society. So with that, I think we're going to close. This has been a great precursor to International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which is coming up on December 3rd. And we look forward to continue carrying on this discussion in future. So thank you so much to everybody. And we really appreciate your participation today. All the best to you, and have a great rest of your day.